what I want? Good. Did that just come on for everybody? We are being recorded?
Yeah.
Good. So we're going to be talking about leadership. And we're going to be talking about it essentially as a matter of relationships and intentionality. And we'll be playing with those words and going deeper behind them quite a bit. And all I'm going to do in the next minutes or hour that we're together is make us all reflective so that we can be more intentional about our relational work, our relational leadership. So just if we could go around quickly, make sure we all know each other. If I'm the only one, am I the only one, Stacy, who doesn't know everybody on the screen?
We may have a few people that don't know each other, Hank. So if we could go through really quick and get everybody to kind of give their name and maybe where they're located.
Excellent. Okay, I'll start. I'm Hank Rubin. I'm the author of the book you guys have, and I'm with the Institute for Collaborative Leadership, and more recently with the Frederick Douglass Center for Collaborative Leadership in upstate New York. Who's next?
How about Tracy Morgan?
Hello, Tracy Morgan here. I'm with Washington State University, FERTEP, Kalispell Tribal Extension for the Kalispell Tribe in Northeastern Washington.
Perfect. Amber Torres.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
So Pijo Wamawa, Amber Torres, Chairman for the Walker River Paiute Tribe in Shores, Nevada.
Welcome,
Thank
Amber.
you. Trent Tigerstrom.
Morning, I'm Trent Tigerstrom. I'm at the University of Arizona, the Associate Director of Tribal Extension Programs, covering all the tribes in Arizona and oversee the FERTEP program for Arizona.
Hi, Trent.
Perfect. Is it Irene Fletcher? I need my cheaters here, so I think it's Irene.
Yes, I'm Irene Fletcher. I'm with the College of the Muskogee Nation. I'm the research specialist.
Perfect. Katie Ford.
My name is Katie Ford. I work with Mississippi State University, and I am the FERTEP agent for the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians.
Thank you. Joanne Warner.
Good morning. I'm Joanne Warner from the Western Center for Risk Management at Washington State University, and I do a lot of work with the FERTEP program with outreach, currently finishing up a ripple effects mapping project with all the FERTEPs.
Thank you. Linda McLean.
Why asked? Good morning. My name is Linda McLean. I am the office director for WSU Caldwell Reservation Extension, which is Washington State University. I'm currently wearing multiple hats. As I said, I am the director for the office. My outreach areas are agriculture, natural resources, and 4-H positive youth development and the FERTEP program. We're located in North Central Washington. Our office is located at the agency campus of the Caldwell Confederated Tribes in Nespelem, Washington.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Robert Fox.
Hello, I'm Robert Fox. I work at United Tribes Technical College in North Dakota. I'm a cultural wellness specialist and work with Extension Agroecology.
Perfect. Welcome. Shirley Nordstrom.
That's Nordstrom. It's a colonized name, so I'm not too worried about the pronunciation, but I am with the FERTEP educator for the University of Minnesota. The tribes that I work primarily with are the Leech Lake, Red Lake, and White Earth bands, but I do make myself available to the other tribes. I'm also a member of the Red Lake Nation.
Thank you and welcome. Sophia Haas.
My name is Sophia Haas. I'm with Assistant Wapaton College. I work as the extension agent here. And I am from the Lakota tribe in Pine Ridge.
Perfect. Todd Mims.
Hi, I'm Todd Nims. I'm a natural resources management instructor at Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Perfect. Welcome. Tracy Wilson.
Hi, I'm Tracy Wilson. I'm the Agricultural Literacy Coordinator and PI on our FERTEP grant with OSU, Oregon State University Extension, with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs.
Perfect. And then we just had Melanie Kirby. Do you want to introduce yourself? I know you just joined us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, very sorry. I was in another meeting. My name is Melanie Kirby, and I am the extension educator at the Institute of American Indian Arts in our land grant program.
Perfect. And from what state and university did you say that, Melanie?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the Institute of American Indian Arts. We're based in Santa Fe.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, Hank, that is everybody on the list. Did I forget anybody? I think we got everybody. So
Good. I'm going to, I want to tell everybody, a few of you know this, that I spent several years living in South Dakota as Dean of Education for a number of the higher ed institutions, working a good deal with reservation schools and some of the teacher education programs across the state. This opportunity to work with folks who are deeply embedded in the work of Indian country in America is so terribly important, and I'm so proud to be invited to participate in this. Stacy and Vicky and others have called on me a couple of times, and it touches a very important part of my heart to be able to have this affiliation and the opportunity to contribute whatever I can to the effectiveness of the work you're doing. It's important work and it's appreciated, so thank you. I want to not take the time to do what I was going to ask you to do here on this slide. But because this is for you, I want to make sure that, as I said before, we cover what you want and you need covered as you think about how to focus on and improve the leadership you're providing and the development of leaders with whom you come in contact in your work. So I'm going to ask you to make a point of making a list of topics, questions, problems that you want to make sure come up over the course of the sessions ahead. And as I said, you'll get my email address. Stacy knows how to reach me. And I invite you to drop me notes, drop me questions, and I'll make sure that one way or another, I either directly respond to you or integrate what you offer up into our discussions going forward. So nothing will be lost. Okay. Let me step back now and give this moment to Stacy. Is Vicky on too, or is Vicky's branding, if I remember correctly, isn't she?
yeah, Vicky's out today, but
Yep.
So I'll be facilitating Hank today. But we do have our tribal leader with us, and what we're trying to do throughout our week is we're trying to invite different tribal leaders from around the country to address a question. And we're hoping that the tribal leaders will have time to join all of our programs, but we know that they're super busy people. So we did ask, we're starting with Nevada. We asked Chairman Amber Torres and Chairman Brian Thomas to be with us. And Amber was so gracious as to join us this morning and to kind of give us some feedback, because we do want tribal leaders' perspectives on collaboration and leadership. So Hank, I don't know if you can put that back up, that first question on your PowerPoint, or if that takes too long, and then we'll have Amber address that real quick. So our
Can you see it?
Yeah. And our tribal leader question today is, how can you use collaboration to influence change by addressing reservation community needs? Okay, Hank, that's perfect. If you can just take it down. And then let's bring, or I can stop the sharing. Amber, do you want to take it from here? And we're going to give Amber some minutes to talk about this and to kind of give us some feedback from her viewpoints as being a tribal leader. And I believe, Amber, you've been a tribal chairman for 6 years now?
Correct. Since 2016, I took over, but I've been on the Walker River Tribal Council since 2010. So
right. She has a lot of experience in tribal leadership. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Amber, this morning.
Right. Well, thank you so much. So again, Pija Wamawa, me, Amber Torres, me Nania, na Agari Karapunabi, na Agaigwe. So good morning, everyone. My name is Amber Torres. I'm the chairman for the Walker River Paiute Tribe located here in Schurz, Nevada. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to sit with you this morning. As a tribal leader, I know, there's always value in hearing our perspective, but, at the same time, we're constantly continuing to learn on a daily basis. And I think that's one thing that we really need to keep in mind, is that we're never done learning and always still teachable. But, so pertaining to the question, I think that collaboration is absolutely critical right now in Indian country. We understand that each respective nation is sovereign, but I think at the same time, we are stronger as one voice. I believe in reaching out to our intertribal councils, coalitions, commissions, and tribes so that we can plan, assign roles and responsibilities, set goals and expectations with hard timelines. As you know, we as Native people, we share, we believe in helping one another, and helping and seeing one another prosper, as that is part of our culture. And again, that's also how we're raised, from the very beginnings, the teachings that were taught, from our grandmothers and our parents, to always walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and see how you can help. I think absolutely we have to be willing to share information, materials, resolutions, and best practices from our nations so that our people can become successful now and in the next 7 generations. As you know, our constituents are the ones that make the decisions, give us our directions, give us our marching orders. And so again, we have to be open. We have to be able to share with one another, our constituents, everything that we do for the betterment of our people. So again, that's a little bit of my perspective. Like I said, I've been here with Walker River Tribal Council since 2010 and taken on the chairmanship since 2016. And I've got 3 more years to go after this, but it's sharing your network, sharing your resources, and just making sure that everybody has the tools that they need in place to be successful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Do we have any questions for Amber before we move on regarding this question? I think, Amber, one of the things that since we have just a few minutes here, would be a good question is, if somebody was new starting on the reservation, how would you suggest they start their collaborative process?
I think it depends on what their project is, but to, try to sit down with all the key players and do a planning strategy, to see how we can all collaborate, what we all bring to the table, and how we're going to get it done. I think working together with the different programs, a lot of people get in silos where they think, I'm doing this on my own, or this is what I'm going to have to do. But I think, again, collaborating with all the different departments and programs and funding, we can just get that much further ahead. And especially, with all the different networks that everybody has, we can change the game, and we've seen a lot of that going on in Indian country right now, from the current administration. We've seen how many people, how many Native people they're actually bringing in, for their expertise, and just, I think that would just get us that much further with all of the projects and goals that we're looking at moving forward.
Perfect. Do we have one more question before we move on?
Let me ask you a couple of questions, Amber, may I?
Sure, please.
You raised some really marvelous points there, and at least one or two of them I never quite played with. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as either the strengths or the challenges raised by the perhaps tensions associated with the balance of sovereign status versus pressure to collaborate? Those pressures towards asserting and affirming sovereignty versus those pressing towards collaboration.
Well, I think, that as sovereign nations, we make decisions on the best behalf of our own nations. But at the same time, when we're working with county, state, federal partners, decisions that are made will affect all tribes and, everybody within Indian country and how we're going to move. So I think collaborating is an absolute must, because we have to get those barriers and we have to get those challenges out of the way to see how it's going to fit each one of our nations the best. So having all those minds at the table to think about, think through some of the barriers and some of the aspects that we're going to be faced upon, is absolutely going to be critical. So I think, again, just having everybody at the table, all the game players around to figure out how we strategically plan moving forward for that ultimate goal is the best way to take a look at everything.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the challenges I see that you have is with everybody, things are really accelerated, I would say right now. A lot of different things we're getting hit with, and trying to prioritize those issues with the different various groups that are after you. I can see that as a real challenge. And I don't know how you sort through that and kind of prioritize some of those.
Well, I think too, like I said, we tend to listen to our constituents quite a bit, at a council level. But at the same time, we're elected to sit here and make decisions on the best behalf of the total membership, or the future of the reservation and the constituents as well. So, I think it's just a matter of, there's always collaboration in everything that you do, whether it be within your own tribal nation or with your outside partners. And, just trying to, again, think about how one thing is going to affect another and coming out with that ultimate goal. But, and even now, with all the funding that's coming down for the different programs and, having to make decisions on infrastructure, and you're absolutely right, what is priority? It doesn't help the access barriers that we have to, supplies and consultants and, all these different things that we're looking at. But, I think, again, just being able to share, being able to communicate, being able to document is all pertinent and part of the plan. And just setting that ultimate goal to see how each role and responsibility of everybody that's involved will help you meet that and get there quickly.
Thanks.
I don't know if I'm violating protocol here, but I don't know if you intend, Amber, to continue to join these meetings going forward, particularly with the experienced and sophisticated thinking on how to balance the pressures towards the individuality and the politics of decision-making and leadership with the advantages of collaboration. I think you bring a great deal into that conversation, and I hope you'll be able to continue to participate in these discussions. I would find it helpful in terms of helping us make sure that the conversations we have are immediately relevant and applicable to the work we're doing in the field. So thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you so much. I'll definitely try to join you however I can. We're just, in the daily life of a tribal leader, it never stops, and I appreciate you guys having these conversations, being the boots on the ground, doing the work, because I know, like I said, a lot of the times people look at you because you're the tribal leader, like you've got all the answers and you should know it all. Absolutely not. So I do commend, everybody who does the hard work, on a daily basis and brings these issues to the table so that I'm educated and I'm aware on how to make things better from my perspective and my level. So I do appreciate, all the collaboration and the training that you guys are doing and the programs that you operate. So thank you, Pijat, you so very much for having me today.
So let me ask you another question drawn from, I'm sorry, was somebody about to say something?
No, I was just going to thank Amber for joining us, and definitely she'll be invited to all the future meetings, and you're more than welcome to stay with us however long you can. I know you've got a super busy schedule, and it looks like Hank has one more question, right, Hank?
Just one more for you. Going to hold on to you as long as we can, Amber.
Yeah, wonderful.
So you use the phrase walk a mile in another person's shoes.
Absolutely.
And I am not Native American. And it's been a long time since I've lived anywhere close to Indian country, frankly, where I'm in right now. Although the land is taken from where I am. I want to ask you to put something on the table, if you will, in terms of culture that I'm not familiar with. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the cultural aspects of empathy and projecting yourself behind the eyeballs of other people? What is the manner in which that plays in the general expectation of culture and interpersonals within our communities?
Yeah, I think you don't even have to be native to understand that part of the culture, and it's just who we are as Native people that we share. And I wholeheartedly believe in this aspect of walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, because that was taught to me from my own grandma, is that you have to have compassion. You have to, you never know what another person is going through. So you have to walk that mile in their shoes and be there to listen, to help. And I think we've seen a lot of this during this whole pandemic, in Indian country. We are lending an ear to one another on, all this funding that's coming down, best practices on how to keep our nation safe. And just how we're moving to start opening back up again, so, I think our culture and our traditions and our teachings and our stories are definitely all part of this. And that's what keeps us grounded. And I think that's why we have done so well as tribal nations, not only with, trying to keep our people safe, but vaccination plans, all those different types of things on our main perspective is to look out for one another and look out for our people, no matter whether they're our tribe or they're not. But, ultimately thinking about the success of one another. So, like I said, I don't know if I answered your question per se, but I don't even think you have to be Native to know that being good to treat people how you want to be treated. And I think that's the ultimate goal. Always keep that in mind, and you'll get that much further in life.
Well, the empathic capacity to be able to see the world through the eyes of those you would lead is an incredibly central element to the whole concept of collaborative leadership. And so I would invite you and everybody else to help make sure that as we go through this together, that we attach both language and anecdotes and supportive perspectives so that the elements of leadership are articulated and discussed in ways that directly relate to the communities and to the work we're doing. I don't want it to be abstract. I want it to draw from the direct elements of the relationship building and relationship management that you all are doing. So thank you very much, Amber. I'm going to see if I can get this back up to where we were. Do you see the PowerPoint again?
Yes, we have your notes page again, though.
You do. Well, let me see if I could do this differently this time. Again. How about now?
Oh, there you go.
Good, good. I'm feeling better and better about technology. So, again, thank you. Is there any follow-up discussion or any questions to wrap up Amber's very kind participation? Let me move us along then. So our first
We got
question.
you. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a question?
No,
Was
I
that
just said-
Amber saying thank you?
Yeah, just thank you so much for having me. You guys have a wonderful training and a good day.
All right,
Thank
thank
you
you,
very
Amber.
much.
Take care.
Good luck. The community has benefited by some incredible leaders. So very pleased to have had the chance to meet Amber. Hope we see you more. So we're going to start out by spending a lot of time on definitions and language because we need to be using words the same way, and the words we use really, as we all know, shape how we think. So let's start with the question of what is collaboration, and I'm going to be taking notes from you because I want to start out by eliciting from you quick, brief definitions of, in your mind, when you see or hear or use the word collaboration, what's it mean to you? And I've got my notepad and you've got the answers.
Working together.
Thank you.
Shared responsibilities and interaction.
Shared responsibilities and what? I'm sorry?
Interactions.
And interactions. Thank you.
I would say teams and teams. What do I want to say on that one? Working towards a common goal.
Thank you. What is that behind you? Sorry. Go on.
Sharing as equals.
Sharing as equals. I heard that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. Working together, shared responsibilities and interactions, teams working towards a common goal, sharing as equals. Other?
Building relationships.
Building relationships. Thank you. Count quietly in your heads to 4. If you get there and no one answers, we'll move on. Okay, but I have to ask, Trent, what is behind you on the screen?
Oh, I did a dive trip and so down around 90 foot, there's a sunken ship, and this is one of the flags that's still flying on it.
That's incredible. Thank you. It was going to be bothering me all day.
I can turn it off if you want.
No, I like it. It was just, I had to know what it was.
And I just, you don't see flags in the current like that very often still on the boats.
Was it a national flag?
That one is actually Marine Corps.
Okay, so let's move to the definition that emerged as we were building the book. And what we came up with, and this is used very often in texts at the moment. A collaboration is a constellation of purposeful relationships in which all parties strategically choose to cooperate in order to achieve shared or overlapping objectives. Now, let's see if we got the things you identified within that definition. The working together is up there. The shared responsibilities and interactions, perhaps not as explicitly, but we'll come back to that. The teams working towards common goal, you see the commonality there. And sharing as equals, building relationships. A collaboration is a constellation of purposeful relationships in which all parties strategically choose to cooperate in order to achieve a shared or overlapping objectives. The word constellation is often sort of singled out as to why that fits into that definition. And the answer as to why constellation is that because we're talking, when we talk about collaborations, of ongoing, a collection, if you will, of ongoing relationships, not singularly an ongoing relationship, but like stars and planets in the universe. We're not just talking about one relationship between the leader and the led. We're talking about multiple relationships. It's not parallel play. It's all these relationships going on simultaneously. It is, in a very real way, if we take a closer look. Coming back to this, constellation is a complexity of multiple relationships, bilateral between the leader and the partner, and multilateral between all the partners. That means the collaborative leader is paying attention not just to his or her relationship with each of the partners, but the relationships that exist among them, which is a complex range of things to be attending to at the same time. It's purposeful. We don't build these relationships for fun. We don't build these relationships because the rules say we have to. They're not mandated. Those relationships are built because those individual relationships are with people, individuals, or organizations that they represent that are essential for the change that is the purpose of the collaborative enterprise. In other words, the constellation exists for a purpose, which is a change. In the context of relationships, building relationships with all those individuals and organizations that are capable of contributing to that change. If you're bringing people together who have no direct relationship to the change that you exist for, those people aren't going to keep coming back. They're not going to have a self-interest in sustaining their relationship to the collaboration you're trying to lead. So their ongoing, persistent, and sometimes even evolving relationship with the change you're trying to accomplish has to be clear in their minds. And the role of the collaborative leader is to help make sure that the individual is persistently understanding how that change is important to their world, their worldview. Okay. The fact that it is strategically chosen means that it's intentional and voluntarily choose to cooperate. It's in their individual or their organizational interest. As I said, they won't stay. And there has to be that one overlapping or shared outcome or objective that everyone understands is the reason we're together. Otherwise, if everybody's there for a different reason, at different points, people are going to flake off because their reason isn't being met, or because they may find a better way of achieving that reason. It is that reason that we're all together, that singular outcome that we all share, that we get reminded of why it's important to us, that keeps us coming back into the collaboration. Questions on that so far? Is that making sense to you? Because we're dealing in definitions and in language. A great deal of this is intuitive. And as I said at the start, it's going to be important that we just sort of stop and reflect on the meaning of what our intuition exposes us to and what the language has us talking about, so that we are consistent and able to share a consistent understanding of the terms we're using. Makes us think about how to use them more effectively, too. Any questions?
Well, when you're saying objective, common objective, it can be multiple objectives that are connected, right? You're not just focused particular on one. And what I'm thinking of, say, to improve rangeland management. Well, that multiple facets to do that and multiple groups associated with that. And you may have to have some stages or steps to get to where you want to be on that. So when do you bring those other steps in to address that, or you work backwards on it? I guess.
Well, and that's the overlapping piece. That's a terrific question. Because fundamentally, the purpose of, if I understand what you're saying there, Trent, the purpose of that collaboration is to build either the resources or the tools that each of us needs back in our own context to be able to get something done that relates to, that we can't do unless we work together to build the resources or tools that we're going to need. Let me see if I made sense to you. Very often, the change that we see in our own organizations or our own communities requires a rule to be changed, a policy to be established, an organization with technical resources to be developed, something that's going to give me what I need to make a particular change back in my institution or my organization. Okay. I'm not able to make that law change, create that external organization, get a policy established or something like that on my own. But if we collect up together, as Amber said, if we join together, we can influence those decisions. So very often the shared outcome is a process outcome that enables us to be able to accomplish something we otherwise wouldn't have back in our own organization. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense to others as well? We need that policy in order to make this change. We need that technical resource organization in order to give us the tools back here to make that change. All of us around the country realize that we all need that in order to make different changes, but related changes that are dependent on that tool, that policy, that resource that we have to join together to create. Great question, Trent. Thank you. We okay? Let's go to the next one. So what is a collaboration? And what you see here is a collaboration exists in order to change. If it doesn't exist to accomplish a change, then it exists simply to manage or sustain or look like it's doing something. That's not a collaboration. Collaboration and change are intrinsically linked. So do you see your organizations up here in these names? A collaboration doesn't necessarily have to have the word collaborative, cooperative, co-op, even team in it necessarily. All of these can be collaborations. So question 2. Who or what is a collaborative leader? who or what is a collaborative leader? So I want to start this a little bit closer to home so that we're thinking about ourselves in the context of, are we collaborative leaders? Do you think that people see you as a collaborative leader? And if so, what is it about you that causes people to believe that you are or are in part a collaborative leader? And don't be shy.
I don't want to take up all the time, but I see the 1994 extension agents and the FERTEP agents as definitely seen as collaborative leaders in their role. They may not see themselves as that though, but that's a part of the job, you know, where they're working with youth, I think, or cattle grower associations or other groups and crossing over to multiple groups. I see that as just one thing that they do a really good job of, but may not see themselves as a collaborative leader in that sense that you described.
So put that in terms of sort of an action description of the work that they do. They are viewed as collaborative leaders because they do.
I'll let them do.
Outreach education. Anybody that works in outreach is very collaborative. The 1994s as well as the FERTEPs work with the native residents of the reservations that they work on respectively. And they have to work, in my case, with all the tribal programs within the reservation. So you're working with a lot of different players, whether it's government, a tribal program, an organization like Livestock Association or 4-H clubs, and then just individuals from the community, because you're providing outreach education and information to them and for them. And then a lot of times with our programs and workshops, we're working with other programs and people to develop those. So I think outreach has a major role in that, because you're reaching out to others.
So you're working with lots of diverse players, and to the extent that you're working with lots of diverse players effectively, then that is an indicator that you are effectively collaborative. You're doing different kinds of I'm trying to come up with another word other than work. You are engaged in education, you're engaged in outreach, you're engaged in organizing. Some of you are engaged in lobbying. Some of you are likely to be engaged, most of you are engaged in the relationship building necessary with foundations and philanthropies and government grant makers. The diversity of roles you have to play calls on you to be able to see through the eyes of different sorts of bureaucratic or organizational functions as well. So there's a degree to which the roles that all of you are playing are distinctly dependent on your collaboration, because you are crossing so many boundaries in so many ways all day. Most people don't know that about you. You need to go out there and brag a little more about that, I think. I mean, this is a world in which the concept of collaborative leadership is absolutely essential for the effectiveness of your work. If you're not doing your darndest to be an effective, empathic, relational collaborator, then you're not going to be able to get your work done, because you'll be isolated in terms of the groups with which you can work and the individuals with whom you're going to be able to establish the relationships necessary to get stuff done. So I say that in order to move us here. Here's a definition of who or what a collaborative leader is. And it is you. You are a collaborative leader once you've accepted responsibility for building or helping to ensure the success of a diverse or heterogeneous team to accomplish a shared purpose. These are just basic, clear-cut definitions that I invite us all to be able to use so that when we talk about our work among ourselves and to other constituencies and publics, we can be clear how we actually are modeling some of the most essential elements of what it takes to be a progressive, collaborative leader. And as such, this distinguishes your work from a lot of other kinds of university work and community-based work. Questions on that definition? You are a collaborative leader once you have accepted responsibility for building or helping to ensure the success of a heterogeneous team to accomplish a shared purpose. So it's important, as simple as that is, it's important to know that you know, a collaborative leader can play any of these roles, be a director, a chair, a chief, a counselor, an organizer, a facilitator, a teacher, a coach, an elder, a captain, any of those roles. But not all collaborative leaders are in those roles. A collaborative leader can be somebody who doesn't have a title, but has influence. It is the style and type of interaction. It is more than the title or the position you hold, because not all, and we know this personally, don't we? Not all chiefs, directors, chairs, elders, coaches, etc., are collaborative leaders. Some of them just don't get it. It just doesn't happen. You're not inspired to collaborate. You're not holding each other accountable for working together. You're not building the necessary bridges to be able to get more done collectively than you could have done alone. So it's important to take out of this that it's not the position that makes somebody a collaborative leader. By definition, a title does not, by definition, give us the respect of being able to declare ourselves a collaborative leader. It's a style, it's a character, it's a purpose, it's the principles. It's not the title, it's the type of leader you choose to be. It's not the title you're given. Okay. I'm going to move us along here just a little bit. I want to pull our understanding of collaborative leadership together into what are some of the essential characteristics, so that as we're using this, we can keep coming back to some common language, as I said. I've used the word purposeful several times, that leadership exists for change. Management exists to sustain and implement. Administration exists to sort of build bridges across systems. But collaborative leadership exists in order to ensure that there is a change as a result of the energy committed to whatever the enterprise is. Any questions on that? What are the essential characteristics that shape the style and character of a collaborative leader? Okay. They are purposeful. They drive towards change. The change is evident, and the clarity of what that change is shared in a mutual understanding. They're relational. Leadership happens through relationships. And, you know, we assume that you get a charismatic leader who can stand in front of a group of people and sway the group through their oratory or through their style, or even through their title necessarily. But oratory, style, and title may get people in the room, but it's not going to persuade people to stick to a challenging relationship long enough in order to be able to get it done. What's going to make that happen is the felt sense by everybody in that room that I identify with, I connect with either the premise or the character of the leader. That leader is working in as many relationships as there are exponentially in that room or in that collective, so that we are making sure that we are connecting with everybody. You leave one person out, you're going to end up losing that person. And it could be that that person brought a constituency you really needed into this, or a skill set you really needed into your work. So that purposeful and relational are essential elements of doing collaborative leadership well. If it's not an authentic relationship, let me add, then what you're going to have is you can make somebody show up in a room. You can pay somebody to show up in a room, but that's coercion or control. You can even in the military compel somebody to be in the room, but that's not collaborative. That's top-down authority structure. And finally, it's accountable. It's accountable mutually. Each of us is accountable to each other, and we share responsibility for that accountability. So that if I'm not holding up my end of the bargain in your eyes, and I'm in the presumption of being your collaborative leader, and you're feeling like the connect isn't working, and right now, in the context of a teaching, learning relationship at this moment, it is really a collaborative enterprise. Teaching is a lot like leading. It operates through the relationships of people in the context of trying to accomplish something mutually. They share a common goal when they gather in a classroom or when they gather in a collaborative work environment. So if in this context, you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, this isn't connecting to me. I'm not feeling as if I have a relationship with this that is sufficient for me to see my self-interest or sufficient for me to want to come back for more, then because we have a mutual accountability to try and make these relationships work because we share interest in that shared outcome, then it's incumbent upon you to tell me, to hold me accountable for not giving you what you need for this to be effective from your perspective. So that changes the roles a bit. We are accountable for and to each other in ensuring that the work we're doing, the time we're spending, the purpose we've gathered for is mutually agreeable and rewarding as we're going through it. Otherwise, we're going to fall off. What are your thoughts on that?
I just wanted to say, oh, go ahead.
I think it was you, Stacy.
Was it just me talking? I thought somebody wanted to also talk. I think one of the things is Hank, when you're just starting out, or if you don't have the contact, how do you get that authentic participation? How do you break into, you know, a new area of people, of collaborators? I mean, you know that you want to move towards this change, but how do you do that? I guess if you know you're kind of an outsider on the reservation or to a certain tribal department, how do you break into that?
How do you start and build a collaboration?
Right.
I think one of the things you need to do is be consistent, no matter what you do. If you call somebody and you set up a meeting with a time and place, work very hard not to change that time, place, location meeting, if at all possible, because the minute you drop the ball on, you know, rescheduling, people lose trust and value in your resource. So they might not be as willing to set up a meeting with you next time. But try to be as consistent as possible and not cancel on meetings or workshops or events with anybody.
I had a comment.
Please.
What I have found is that a relationship is in and of itself part of the partnership and part of the goal, because some members of the community want to be involved whether they do anything or not. They want to be included. So, and it's a sign of respect to do that, and not necessarily want anything out of them, so to speak, except to maintain that relationship. I hope I'm making sense there. And yet it's just as tangible as, having something be utilitarian necessarily. To me, anyway.
So there's a, women from Venus, men are from Mars sort of notion. So let me sort of play a male stereotype here and ask you, Tracy, to help translate what I'm about to say. That I heard you say that relationships in and of themselves are often a part of the purpose of the collaborative enterprise, or whatever the enterprise is, and that this relates to a sense of being respected and included. So am I right on that?
So far, so good.
Okay. And as such, then, the self-interest that we've identified of those participants is that we are making sure that we are doing things that cause them to persist in feeling respected and included. So that's the work we do, making sure we're doing things that persist in ensuring that they feel respected and included. The question becomes, do we do that for everybody in the universe, or are there targeted people or targeted positions where we have to make sure we're doing that as opposed to for everybody? Why is it that, and I'm going to say this in the crudest sense, so permit me there if I may, why is it that we care that that particular person feels respected and included?
Well, I believe that as WSU, as FERTEP, and myself not a tribal member, is that I'm a guest. And guests don't tell people what to do, ever. They're invited to participate and to help partner. And therefore, even in the end of the day, if we have a project where nothing gets done, but everyone's still satisfied, I let it go, because they have tribal council and advisory board members have final say in what happens. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, what you're saying is it's very important to you that you have a relationship of respect, mutuality, access, confidence, because if you have people who are within the tribal context who feel as if they are not included, engaged, I'm putting words in your mouth here, Tracy, who do not feel that they are being respected, included, engaged, then they are not going to feel good about your leadership. And they are going to, one way or another, not be supportive of that. Am I right? I'm being very utilitarian with you, but I'm trying to do that. Is there a way to think of this in terms of the contributory role, the contribution that each member is making to the larger enterprise? Go on, you were about to respond.
Yeah, I think what I heard you say, and what I was trying to say is that if we shoot solely for change, we may have relationship train wrecks along the way.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So if we shoot for this mutuality, like you've got in there, and this idea that we're working as a group, and that in and of itself has such value, that share, that bond, that in the end of the day, if for instance with me, if the garden doesn't produce 200 pounds of tomatoes, but I've got 10 community members interested in the tomatoes, or in at least the group, then I've succeeded. So
Tracy, don't you think, and Hank, don't you think this goes back to a little bit on, especially from coming as a either non-native or a different tribe to another tribe, is that trust development is what you're getting at with that, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, I really think what Tracy's talking about there is that person. I'm really struggling with what you're saying here, Hank, because I'm looking at what you're saying, and I understand it from a colonial Western system, this case being education. But I also understand my own traditional leadership. And I would say that if I was going to use English words to describe it, that our clan system of leaderships are collaborative, but they're not always for change. And so we have two cogs here trying to, like, this is what I'm trying to do, is like make these two cogs work together. And when you throw in the fabric of the community's deep cultural understanding of who we are trying to work in, that, like, that fabric gets caught in the cogs and it slows it down, or it may even log jam it. And so what I heard Tracy talking about is that person that wants to, they don't seem as if they're involved, but they're watching what she's doing. I suspect that they are a leader, a very strong leader in their own community, and they understand their own cultural ways. So Tracy's trying to work in that and work in this other system, and she has to be careful how she does that without destroying that relationship.
I really appreciate what you're saying there. And I want to broaden my lens in responding to it with you. Sometimes the change is not what you bring in, you're building or changing the direction of a group. Sometimes the change could be standing strong to preventing outside forces from changing the nature of the group. Sometimes the purpose, the focus of change is to resist forces that might otherwise cause change that you want to protect against. So I'm wondering if I'm looking to bridge. I really am appreciating particularly how you.
Well, not that good. or else
I'm sorry.
I think we just had some interference. I went ahead and muted Roxanne. If you have a question, please let us know.
Was it Shirley who raised that? Who was speaking just before I spoke?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shirley, can you tell me if, because I want very much, I'm very much in a learning and growth mode myself, and I want very much to make sure that I'm not imposing on this a cultural perspective, or to the extent I am, and to the extent that everybody does, because we all do that per force of just being humans and evolving out of the context we grew up in. That I'm recognizing and respecting the points that you were making as to the cultural perspective on change versus collegiality and groupness.
Was there a question in there? If it was, I missed it.
Yes, surely. I was trying to. I would like very much to come back to this as the group sees it appropriate, but I want us to. I think thematically, revisiting the question of the relationship of change and how to define it. What does it mean? And is it as relevant in this context as it would be in other cultural contexts? Is it, I'd like us to come back to that. And I'm going to ask you, Shirley, if you'd be a partner in helping make sure that we do that in a way that's productively contributing to leadership development in this conversation. Will you help me on that?
Sure. Yeah, because, I'm sorry, I only got to read the book last night and I've been chewing on this. Like, I actually didn't sleep because I was like, this doesn't mesh with our cultural leadership. So I was trying to figure it out. So definitely willing to come back to that.
I'm going to ask either you to do this, or I'm going to ask Stacy to give me contact information for you. And I'd love to follow up on this with you to make sure that we address this in a way that makes it maximally productive in this conversation. Okay? You willing to? I'm going to count on you being willing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Good. Okay. Well, I don't know how much more time we have here, so I want to move us quickly through. I'm going to actually, Stacy, how much time do we have?
We have about 10 minutes before we get to our hour-and-a-half mark, Hank.
People, before I move into another quick conversation here, is there anybody else who wants to address where we've gotten ourselves to at this moment? I'm excited about the idea of really tackling this as a perhaps even a colliding of cultural perspectives that needs to be reflected on, because there can be no doubt in my mind that what will come out of that will be some deep thought that'll be helpful to all of us. So I look forward to that. Okay, so I'm going to just move to something that is just a basic sort of foundational element of what the tools are of leadership, of collaborative leadership. And fundamentally, it's very, very simple. You only have two tools associated with providing this kind of leadership. When Amber talked at the beginning about being able to see through the eyes or walk a mile in the shoes of somebody else, the language that you'll see used in the book has a lot to do with being able to see through the eyes, put yourself into the universal experience, the perspective of the people you're working with in the leadership relationships. So you need to see yourself and you need to see the issues through the eyes of the people with whom you're dealing. So that the major tool you have is how do you come across and how do you build the relationships with the individuals such that those relationships are mutual in their eyes and important from their worldview. So you have your behavior, you have your communication, you have your organizational resources that you can influence. You're moving all the bits and pieces about how you come across in relationship with them so as to build the necessary leadership relationship, trust, confidence, respect, and mutual accountability to be able to sustain the work relationship necessary to collaborate and get work done. And then what you have is the second piece is the structure of the system or organization you're working in. Is it a formal group? Is it an informal group? Is it staffed? Is it not staffed? Is it something that meets regularly, or just is this collaborative work that you're doing something that slides into other work relationships you have or other types of relationships you have with those people? So it's never something that is in an isolated structure, but it's part of how you live together. This has to do over here with the structures of the higher ed institutions and how you adapt, tweak, manipulate, and how you try to influence those so that they are accessible, useful, responsive to what you need them to be doing in the context of your relationship with the folks on the reservations. And it's also a function of, well, I'll just leave it at that. So those are, we deal with ourselves and the behavior and manifest ways we interact with people as one set of tools. And the other set of tools is how we structure, move, organize the systems and organizations that we're dealing through. And so the rest of our time is going to be looking in only those two contexts, at how we address ourselves in relationship, how we build the necessary relationships personally, and the other is how do we support, sustain, and implement the outcomes of those relationships through the structures that we're working with. Making some sense? Probably makes a little more sense in the book. So basically, it's very basic. And that's more or less the point I'm going to want to bring across, that it is very basic. It comes down to just these two things. Effective collaborative leadership is the ability to, and I really invite you to tear into this, the ability to convene and sustain relationships, influencing individuals and institutions, and the ability to find and sustain common self-interests in the diverse missions and goals of the independent actors you're working with. The most important language here that I want to end with is collaborative leadership is a skillful and change-oriented facilitation of relevant relationships. That's what I want us to tear into. Are each of those elements of collaborative leadership skillful and change-oriented facilitation with relationships being at the core? Let's make sure that we are comfortable with the meaning of each of those, that we adapt this to the context we're applying it in. And I look forward to reshaping this, if that's where we're going, so that the conversation we have is directly relevant and respectful of and responsive to and informed by the cultures in which we're operating. So, and that's always got to be the priority. So with that, I think I'm just about, that's it. I'm gonna call it on this. That's it for today. I'm going to give you this, which is my email address right there. It's hrubin@collaborative-leaders.org. Really, and that's my cell phone, and that's with me all the time. I really want to invite you to take that down and ask me questions, educate me, influence the direction of this conversation so that what we're going to be doing sort of leaps from the general overview of this conversation into some very specific work going forward that is immediately responsive, that takes the book into immediate responsiveness to the work you're doing. Okay?
Okay, perfect. I want to thank Hank for this kickoff meeting, and I kind of want to, before we get to the homework discussion, go over with everyone is that the way our homework is set up in the guide was our best guess. we are not locked into locking you into certain breakout rooms with ag and youth and families, because I think this discussion today talked about the cultural differences between the norms that we have in the outside world off the reservation and those rules and norms that we do have on the reservation. And if it's going to be the most powerful to help the most people for us to deal with one of those issues in the breakout room, I think that's where we need to go, or you tell me where we need to go that is going to offer you the most support in the issues that you're dealing with or facing. That's one of the things that we want to move this forward. When we first, so how we designed the training is these breakout rooms and to have individuals work together. And we're all going to see each other, hopefully in person in Kansas City in the fall. So I'm hoping that everybody will be able to make that final meeting, but throughout this summer, we want to work together online. So I think one of the things is we had the original breakouts as agriculture, natural resources, youth development, health and wellness. If we need to change any of those topics, or if we need to move this in a total different direction, we need to hear from you.
May I interject something, Stacy? Just the reason for those breakouts was, in the minds of those of us who were putting this together, was that the only way we're really going to get down and dirty into applying and testing and getting better at these skills of collaborative leadership is by working on a problem that requires us to focus on together, doing something collaboratively, making something happen collaboratively. And that if each of us were to identify one or two questions or issues or concerns or problems that we wanted to tackle, come back to, I think we had said, Stacy, come back to the next meeting. And we would share what those are, look for common buckets they may fall into, so that we could create work groups in each of the areas where there are common buckets. And that was the clustering that Stacy was just talking about, so that we are working together at relatively similar problems and issues that we're trying to apply as we're learning the collaboration skills. So the question that I think Stacy's struggling with, and I'm struggling with now, is are we ready, and are we interested in going the next step of saying that the homework assignment entails identifying one or two things that you would like to really focus on in the context of this work, this conversation, in which you will apply your collaboration focus to one of those one or two items you come up with.
Yeah, Hank, I hadn't quite gotten there yet. I was just laying the groundwork for the homework. I hadn't gotten to the homework yet. So, but one of the things
Hey, Stacy?
Yes.
This is Linda McLean, and I know you have it broken out into topic areas, but with the exception of a few of us on here, many of the people are new to FERTAP. And one of the challenges probably for a lot of us is how to just build that relationship coming in as a new FERTAP and building your relationship with the reservation or tribes that you're tasked to work with. That might be a good topic area for that people might be interested in, because like I said, with the exception of a few on here, a lot of people are relatively new to FERTAP, and probably 1994 as well.
Well, and that's kind of why, Linda, I wanted to preempt it before we did get into the homework, because if that's the approach that we need to take, I mean, and then if there's those of you that have other issues that you would like to work on, if we could go ahead and move into the homework as far as identifying those issues and see where we land on Monday, and we'll have this discussion next week on how we're going to move forward, and take this time to really reflect on what would help you the most, because we're not set in stone on this. We have the ability through the breakouts, through the mentors, through this whole educational process to move and change based on your needs.
Yes, Stacy, I think a part of going back on what Shirley was talking about and some of the topics she brought up, I think, before we move forward, we, even as new people in this exist, maybe a little longer term, those are important things to understand. And I think we really need to, before we get, because those permeate through all these other areas, no matter what topic you're dealing with. If we don't have that content right, that Shirley was talking about, then we're going to kind of, I think, not be as effective when we go down to these other levels. That's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else?
I think Shirley has opened up the door to an extraordinary conversation about really the meaning, the relevance, and the application of collaboration in the context of the work you're doing. I think and I agree with what Trent said, and I certainly am encouraged and agree with what Shirley said, that this is an important first step conversation, so that we're all understanding what are the priority elements of doing collaboration well.
And I know, Shirley, we're sitting here talking about you. Do you have any thoughts?
Did I open a can of worms?
No, this is exactly what we wanted. So
That's my role in life.
did you have any other thoughts, Shirley, about that?
No, I think it is important. I think that, with my other university partners in Extension, how they approach tribal work, and I watch it be unsuccessful time and time again. Even though I try to mentor, they just can't seem to, I don't know, relax enough or understand enough to get the dynamics of what it really takes to work in a tribal community. And it always fizzles because I think they give up. So I think it is critical to the success of FERTEP educators that are not from their respective tribes that they're serving.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'd like to say a few things.
Go ahead, Robert.
Robert, I am a tribal member and I worked with many FERTEP and universities, and I work at a tribal college. And what Shirley is saying, that's really important. That's kind of why I was here too, is, to help to learn stuff, but also let people know that, I've seen that same thing happen where people come in and they got all this training, even some people with PhDs, but they don't understand the dynamics of how tribal things happen and stuff. Because at many FERTEPs I talked to are saying, I just can't, the community, it's hard to become, have them trust me or whatever. Now, first thing I ask them is just a simple question, is have you went to any like sporting events or any event in the community? And sometimes they'd be like, well, I don't play sports, or I don't go to bingo. I'm not a bingo person. I said, well, if you're not going to any of these places, they're never going to be trusting you, because you don't have to play bingo. You don't have to be a sports star or love a sport, but you have to be in those events with those people for them to stay. They'll see you. And once they see you, they'll start slowly building, okay, these guys are important to us, because so many times, so many people come in and want to help people, our communities, tribal communities, and then they're gone, or they're just trying to push their ideal on them, and that they're used to that, so they know to be super cautious.
Can I say something? Yeah, in addition to that, I think that's what we call in Extension as an immersion, especially if you're coming from a different culture. And most especially here in the US, where the culture already has a certain kink in the relationship. And if you don't immerse yourself into the culture that you're going into, then it would be very difficult for you to really understand how the tribe works and how the community clicks. And so it's very important to really, as what Robert has said, not just focus on what you're doing, but really immerse yourself in understanding the community. And by doing so, you understand them, and as well as they see you and they see your sincerity in doing tribal extension or helping the community. Because if you're just focused on what your objectives are without taking the cultural sensitivities of the community, then it would be very difficult for you to get your foot into the community.
Could I just add here too, I think another really important piece of this is reciprocity. So it isn't just the tribe or just the outside people. It really is. I think that goes back to what you were saying, Hank, about the shared responsibility, but there does have to be, I think, reciprocity for any cultural relationship to be effective and purposeful.
I wanted to go back to that word I saw. I think not to do anything that's transactional. If you're there to get something or get something out of it, I found, historically, that is a very old, sad situation that the tribes, people have wanted to get something, either notoriety or career or grants and so if you're going to enter a community, in my opinion, you need to let that all, you can't be there for that reason. You have to be there because you care about that tribe and those people. So
authentic is an important word. Transactional, of course, is superficial and manipulative.
Okay, perfect. I think we've got some good notes, and Hank will probably debrief before next Wednesday. So I'll be contacting you to set that up. One of my things with everyone is, do you want to still list your problems and challenges and get those to us so that we can kind of categorize them next week? And then I think I took some notes on our recent conversations that we need to also develop and put into kind of the syllabus that we have moving forward this summer. Does that sound like an okay plan? Okay, I'm getting people shaking their heads on the ones that I can see and thumbs up. So if you want to do that, if you can send us a couple of things that you want to work on, if you can email Vicki and I. If you don't hear from you probably by Monday or Tuesday next week, we will follow up with you and see if we can get those. And then in the meantime, I think we're going to look at how do you approach tribal work. And we're going to use you guys as educating each other. That's my thought process, Hank. I know we haven't discussed that, but I think we have a lot of knowledge within this Zoom room. And I think we need to build upon each other's strengths to help each other. And that is the basis of what this summer educational program is all about. Because by educating others, you're also going to have that continual learning. And that's one of the things I think, was important in our tribal leader this morning, that she admitted that everybody is continually learning. All of us are learning. So this is a huge opportunity that we have to learn from each other, and we want to use those resources.
Very good.
Roxanne, I know you just turned your camera on. Did you have a comment for us?
No, I just finally was able to find a place to sit down and actually communicate that way. And I'm really sorry I didn't know I wasn't muted when I was talking earlier.
Oh,
But
sure.
I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series because I collaborate a lot with Montana State University, and I have a research grant that's going to be ending. And so I'm all about making connections with other tribes and other colleges. So I'm really interested to see where this is going to go.
Perfect. Do we have any closing comments?
Thank you, everybody. This is challenging work. Sorry, Stacy, for jumping over the explanation of the homework there, but this is challenging. This is dynamic. It's changing. It's changing, and the best we can do in educating ourselves and each other is to get a sort of a common language out there and then tear into it and apply it and figure out what works and what doesn't work in a different context. And we're each going to find our own comfort level as we build those skills. So I appreciate the dickens out of the chance to be with you. And I particularly appreciate the shared accountability in making sure that we're producing here a learning activity that's going to benefit all of us and benefit the people we work with. So thank you.